I keep finding myself coming back to Skyrim. It's a game you pick up, mod to death, and play for a couple of weeks before putting it down and then repeating that cycle a couple years down the line. It's a comfort game that, despite its flaws, I couldn't tell you how many playthroughs I've dedicated to. As part of the Elder Scrolls franchise, it's an immersive, world-building lore Goliath that still retains that feeling of adventure regardless of how many times you've experienced it, irrespective of how many times the game has abruptly crashed to desktop simply because it felt like it. Installing mods that transform the dragons into bloodthirsty versions of Thomas the Tank Engine notwithstanding, this game embodies the philosophy of a magical adventure. But what is an adventure without the odd mystery? And well, Skyrim, like any Elder Scrolls game before it, and indeed any Bethesda Game Studios title, has its own fair assortment of puzzling conundrums, some intentional, some not so much, for the player to ponder over as we explore this spirited world in this borderline dysfunctional game. And so I wanted to do something in keeping with the comment that inspired me to start up my quintillionth playthrough. So join me on the cusp of a new, or rather old, rabbit hole to slot in alongside my other content that are the mysteries of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. And I'm sure with time I'll come up with a more appropriate playlist title. So with the premise of what I want these videos to be established, I need an entry point, and fortunately for today's video, I have one. Welcome to Windhelm, a city as old as it is cold, the capital of the Hold of Eastmarch, the seat of power of Ulfric Stormcloak, the leader of the Stormcloak Rebellion that has hurled the province of Skyrim into a bloody civil war. A bitter conflict born from the philosophies of a man disillusioned with the empire he once served, now fighting for independence, preaching pro-Nord values to the extent of, for the sake of setting the scene not taking 6 months, alienating the other races. And naturally, Windhelm mirrors its Jarl's distrustful view of outsiders. With the city's population heavily segregated, the Dark Elves are confined to the run-down Grey Quarter, at least when it comes to accommodation, and the Argonians aren't even welcome within the city's walls, though it's played down a fair bit for quality of life in gameplay should you choose to play as anything but a Nord. The point intended to be made is that Windhelm is a cold, unfriendly place, rife with prejudice and misery. And its woes extend far beyond being the central hub of the Stormcloak Rebellion, or indeed its less than hospitable approach to treating those deemed to be outsiders. For during the events of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, there is something more openly sinister afoot in the city of Windhelm. A series of vicious crimes carried out by an unknown perpetrator, adept at evading capture, within the walls of this ancient settlement. I am of course talking about the story of the Butcher. Our adventure today begins upon our arrival in the city of Windhelm, where our first few interactions within the walls suggest that this place has its struggles, and among them we learn of the death of a woman named Frigga Shattershield.
Our little girl died recently. I've been shouldering my days with strong mead, but nothing gives my Tova peace.
And it doesn't take us long to discover that she didn't die of natural causes, but rather was killed by an unknown assailant, and this isn't the first life he's claimed. In fact, we can ask around the city of Windhelm regarding the series of killings that seemingly has the populace living in fear.
My heart goes out to Clan Shattershield. Kin murdered, family warhammer stolen. There's no fairness in all that.
Be on the lookout. The Butcher could be around any corner.
There have been murders in Windhelm?
None of that matters to me. Until someone takes a Dunmer, I'll let Windhelm deal with its own problems.
There's certainly an interesting point to be made about Windhelm's cultural problems, shall we say, not aiding matters when it comes to quelling this lunatic's killing spree. That said, the divide in Windhelm's populace isn't the only factor to consider, As other dialogue would suggest, it isn't perceived the guards are awfully fussed with the prospect of catching this maniac.
If the guards would listen to Viola, they'd have caught the butcher by now.
So it's clear this elusive butcher has been quite the pressing issue in Windhelm for a while. Certainly long enough for members of the public to grow frustrated with the guards' efforts towards exacting justice. And considering this butcher has a nickname by the time he killed Frigga Shattershield, we can conclude she wasn't his first victim. But before we can turn our gaze to how many people the butcher has killed, in order for a development to occur, we must leave Windhelm and return at a later date. For it's when we do this that we will discover the butcher has struck again. And we can find the remains of Susanna the Wicked, a Nord woman under the employ of Candlehearth Hall, sparking the side quest, Blood on the Ice.
Hold it there. Keep your distance.
What happened here?
Another girl killed. This is Susanna, from Candlehearth Hall. Served me a drink just a few nights ago, but I can't say I knew her.
Another? This has happened before.
Susanna's the third. It's always the same. Young girl, killed at night, body torn up.
Are these murders being investigated?
We are stretched thin as it is with the war. Nobody has the time to spend on this. Not pleasant, but it's the truth.
Could you use some help?
If you want to help, ask some of these gawkers if they saw anything useful. I'm going to examine the body before the rats can get to it.
Another one. Terrible.
And like that, we have now embarked on the most notoriously buggy quest in Skyrim. It can break in a handful of ways at every stage. It's honestly quite ridiculous, but no matter. We have a crime scene to investigate. The body is in a notable state, but we'll start with questioning the witnesses, starting with the account of Calixto Corium.
Sorry, I thought I saw a fellow running away, but didn't get a good look at him. A most pleasant chat.
What? No matter. Next we have Silda, the Unseen.
I heard a scream and came running, but she was already like this when I got here.
And finally, we have a priestess-looking lady named Helgud.
This is a shame. No, sorry. But I did notice that her coin purse was still intact, so whoever did this wasn't after gold. I'm going to keep preparing the body, if you'll excuse me.
So nobody saw anything of particular note, aside from Calixto claiming he clocked a fellow running away, and the revelation that Susanna the Wicked's coin purse is intact, courtesy of Helgud, and thus we have nothing really of note to report back to the guard.
Just like always, nobody saw anything useful. Bastards escaped again.
There might be more to this, if you let me help.
Look, Fred, if you think you can do better than the Legion of Guards, be my guest. You'll need to talk to Jorleif, though. We can't just let anyone go around claiming to be on official business. If he's willing, then we'll talk.
So before we go and have a natter with the Jarl's steward, there are a few things of note here. For instance, the murder of Susanna gives us some modicum of a pattern. She was a Nord, as was Frigga Shattershield. Considering the tension between the Dunmer and the Nords, you'd have thought that would have been noted, and perhaps even cast suspicion towards the Dark Elves of the Grey Quarter. It wouldn't be entirely insane for the Butcher to be a monster of Windhelm's own making. And to be fair, I am just surprised the game doesn't play with that notion. However, that most certainly isn't a clue for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we can continue the quest, but secondly, Susanna the Wicked is fairly sympathetic to the Dark Elves, and when she's alive, we're led to believe she probably doesn't have any enemies. Were there a Dark Elf conspiracy, I think it's fair to say there are far more qualified victims within Windhelm who are openly bigoted towards them. We also know the killer targets young women specifically. But the question is, of course, why? So let's go and have a chat with Jorleif, who can be found in the Palace of the Kings. I've heard about these murders.
These are difficult times indeed, when men stalk their brethren like beasts. My men are stretched thin as it is. If you offer your aid, I gladly accept. The guards will be told to assist you as necessary. I'm happy to lend a hand as much as I can as well.
The people are behind you.
Well, that was oddly easy. Jorleif has granted me permission to aid in the investigation.
All right then. I noticed a trail of blood leading away from here. Helgud's taken the body into the Hall of the Dead to prepare for burial. She's a little crazy, but if she knows anything, it's dead bodies.
We'll come back to that blood trail in a moment, but for the time being, let's go into the Hall of the Dead and have a few words with Helgud. But before we do, let's turn our eyes to the state of Susanna's remains ourselves. Now, I think it's fair to say that she's not well. Her remains are covered in gashes, slashes and incisions. Some of her injuries appear more precise than others. However, it's clear the killer struck with disproportionate ferocity. So Helgud, have you noticed anything strange about the body?
Well, she's dead. But I guess that's not unusual, at least not for somebody in here. I mean, someone who's not me, that is. Sorry, was only joking with you. The only unusual thing is the shape of the cuts. They look like they were made with... well, the ancient Nords used these kinds of curved blades when they embalmed their dead. I don't know who in Windhelm would even have something like that. Other than me, of course.
Now, it isn't advisable that we accuse Helgud of having something to do with this.
I'm too busy tending to the dead to spend my time making more of them. And I wouldn't very well tell you about the cuts if I had made them, now would I? Now, I really got to get back to the body. A lot of work to prepare her for the grave.
But either way, we've got what we came for. At least as part of his attack, the butcher used ancient Nordic embalming tools to carve up the victim. So it stands to reason the killer likely has access to these tools. Aside from Helgud herself, who is clearly no stranger to embalming bodies, but I think it's fair to say she spends so much time doing it for a living that I doubt she wants to do it recreationally too. So I suppose that's something to be on the lookout for. But for now, let's turn our focus to following this blood trail away from the crime scene, leading us to the doorstep of a house in the northwestern side of the city. A cozy looking gaff named Hjerim. Approaching the house will prompt us with the objective of gaining access to the house, where we can either pick the lock or speak with Jorleif.
Frigga Shattershield's old place? It's been abandoned ever since she was killed. I think her mother, Tova, has the key.
It is an interesting revelation that the house belonged to one of the butcher's victims. Blood trails leading from a crime scene associated with the butcher in this house therefore cannot be a coincidence. So we need to head to the Shattershield residence, which is oddly right next door to Hjerim, and somehow acquire the key from Tova Shattershield.
I've been a bit out of sorts since our daughter was taken from us. Not really sure what to do with myself anymore. I just miss her so much.
To cut a long story short, she gives us the key without too much of a fuss. We simply have to inform her that we're investigating the murders.
Hjerim? Well, I'm not sure what you think you'll find there, but you're welcome to have a look.
And now it's finally time to head inside Hjerim and see what secrets it holds for us. And it's once inside that the game broke for me, but I did manage to bypass this problem with a few console commands. Entering the house reveals it to be a dark, empty place, within which there are a few things to investigate. However, this is what broke for me. There were no prompts to interact with anything inside the house. So I'll tell you how I overcame that hurdle in a moment, but for now there are things to observe here. In a chest against the wall to the left from the entrance, we can find 11 copies of a pamphlet known as Beware of the Butcher. It reads, "Beware the Butcher, the killer who haunts the streets of Windhelm. These calamitous times bring out the worst in people. Don't become the next victim. See Viola Giordano if you spot any suspicious behaviour." Now, it's unusual that there are so many in here, but if the butcher has indeed been in this house, it's fair to assume that these pamphlets have been put up all over the city, and to avoid too much notoriety, the killer might have discreetly removed them and then put them here so that they're not out on the streets. While we're here, we also have a book in this chest known as the Butcher's Journal No. 1, which more or less confirms what I just said. And it reads as follows: "The plans are coming together swimmingly. I've found good sources of bone, flesh and blood, but thus far a good sampling of sinew and marrow have escaped me. No matter, the city is swollen with contemptuous fools who will be missed by nobody. Last night was almost able to corner Susanna as she left Candlehearth Hall. Idiot guard showed up at just the wrong moment and I had to turn about, just out for a stroll and so forth. There will be other chances, but the time is drawing near. I think back to my time in Winterhold, all the wasted minds up in their towers. They only explore the magic they already know. I am discovering new magic here, something deeper than the cantrip shenanigans of fire and light. This flesh magic is older than us, perhaps older than the world itself. I am tugging at the corners of the fabric of the universe, and where it bunches and folds is where I shall create my greatest triumph. One more attempt at the Candlehearth girl. She's proving to be a bit too cautious, but those strong joints of hers should contain the most exquisite tendons, worth the effort, tonight. So it would appear as if the butcher is killing to extract body parts for some odd reason. Clearly he's experimenting with some dark magic indeed, but to what end? For the sake of curiosity? Or is there an objective? Towards the back of the house on the ground floor we can find more Beware the Butcher pamphlets implying what we already know. The butcher has been taking these pamphlets down, and beneath one of these piles is a strange amulet. It's unclear what its function is, but it does depict a rather macabre green skull. The upstairs is fairly empty, however there is a chair stacked onto a bed that is placed awkwardly. However, most of the prompts to investigate the house are just things that are there and aren't necessarily relevant. But what is relevant is one of these bookshelves actually holds a false panel, and it's within that we will make quite the discovery. The site of a ritual of some description, complete with a copium of body parts, and of course embalming tools. It's unclear how the butcher came into possession of so many body parts, considering he's only believed to have killed 3, but he may have had other victims that nobody noticed, because counting the human skulls alone here, there are 14 of them laying around, and I doubt they were charitably donated by any deceased's next of kin. What this implies is the butcher may have been active for far longer than anybody realised. However, some of these skulls are clean, which suggests to me they've been dead for quite some time, and could easily have been taken from somewhere you'd expect to find skulls, places oddly abundant in Skyrim. However, others are bloodied, which may suggest the butcher has claimed more lives than those we're aware of. And since he himself states the city is swollen with contemptuous fools who will be missed by nobody, perhaps the broader populace of the city is only aware of the victims who turned out to be missed by somebody. But that theory would rely on him taking the bodies altogether. That way nobody knows they're dead, just like nobody realised they existed. And considering the extent of body parts found here, that isn't impossible. But we also know he doesn't always do this. Anyway, let's not get too carried away. On the altar we can find the Butcher's Journal number 2, and here is what it says. 17 tendons and assorted ligaments, 173 fragments of bone for assemblage, approximately 4 buckets full of blood, Nord preferred, 6 spoons of marrow, no more than 2 from a thigh, 12 yards of flesh before cutting. Star scrying to the edge of the ice mind, look to the lights where the souls dance, revealing the time when a spark will revive, when the rotted unites under most skillful hands. Translation from Oldma text as interpreted by Aliads and first transcribed by Altma, provenance and authority unknown. Soon. So the butcher doesn't appear to be explicitly killing for the sake of killing, but rather to perform a ritual of some description, and that just so happens to require him to relieve some locals of their breathing privileges. It would appear as if he's dabbling in necromancy. This, along with remarks in his first journal about those at the College of Winterhold being wasted minds, would suggest we're looking for somebody magically inclined. And you would be right for stating that within the Elder Scrolls universe that doesn't necessarily narrow things down much. But anyway, here's how I unbroke the quest-breaking bug that I encountered. The problem I had was I couldn't interact with any of the clues as their prompts had gone missing. However, in order to progress you need to pick a few items. There are 4 things you need to have in your inventory markers on top of the other interactions you would normally be able to do. That was Beware the Butcher and the Strange for the quest to. So I entered these 4 lines in the console commands to spawn the items into my inventory, which then allowed me to continue. Items in your inventory. And naturally, the next objective is to follow up on the clues we found here. Having the Beware the Butcher poster in our inventory will allow us to ask the guards about the butcher, prompting a less than interested response, albeit pointing us in the right direction nonetheless.
Ugh. Have you been talking to Viola Giordano? She posts those all over the city, and someone keeps taking them down. Ask her about it if you want an earful.
And we can also ask about the amulet that we found.
I've never seen anything like it. I would take this to Calixto at the House of Curiosities. He has a good eye for strange trinket. Might even give you a bit of gold for it.
Calixto from earlier, who witnessed the murder of Susanna the Wicked, or at least the aftermath. If the guards think he might be able to tell us about this amulet that we found, perhaps it's time we pay him a visit at his House of Curiosities. Here's what he has to say about the amulet.
Let me see. Ah, yes. This is the wheelstone. It's an heirloom symbol of the power of Windhelm. Traditionally, it's carried by the court mage. I would be interested in acquiring it, if you're willing to part with it, that is. For a piece like that, I could pay 500 gold.
Shouldn't the court mage have it?
Wunferth? Bah, it's purely ceremonial, and he has no use for it. Besides, I wouldn't want to be the one to give it to him. Gives me the creeps. They say he dabbles in necromancy.
So it seems Calixto has given us the name of a suspect, the court mage of Windhelm, Wunferth, whom, according to Calixto's appraisal of the amulet, would possess such a thing. And apparently the man is rumoured to dabble in necromancy. As we know, the butcher more than dabbles, he indulges. But while we're in Calixto's house, he has a lovely mini museum of sorts. And it would be a shame not to ask this humble gentleman how he assembled his collection.
My sister and I inherited a modest sum of money. We decided to travel and seek out whatever adventures we could find. As we journeyed across Tamriel, we encountered tales of exotic and wondrous artifacts. We decided to collect as many as we could. My sister passed away some years ago, so I settled down here and opened the House of Curiosities. I think she would be happy to know that our collection has brought smiles to faces both young and old.
You mentioned a tour.
Indeed I did. For a few septims, I'll tell you about some of the most interesting curiosities in my collection.
Well, that sounds reasonable. Let's see what he has.
Splendid. If you'll just follow me, I'll tell you tales and show you wonders such as you've never seen. These tools were found in a crypt outside Windhelm. They belonged to the ancient Nords who dwelt in Skyrim before the days of the First Empire. Most scholars believe that the Nords of old used these implements to prepare their dead for burial. What macabre mysteries would these tools reveal if they could but speak?
This may seem entirely irrelevant, but if you recall...
The only unusual thing is the shape of the cuts. They look like they were made with... Well, the ancient Nords used these kinds of curved blades when they embalmed their dead. I don't know who in Windhelm would even have something like that. Other than me, of course.
According to Helgud, tools not dissimilar to these were used in the butcher's attacks, and they aren't exactly commonly found in the possession of everyday people, so somebody being in possession of them is certainly eyebrow-raising considering the butcher's use of them. However, it's not awfully eyebrow-raising, as there are embalming tools in the butcher's lair as well, and these could just as easily be the tools in the murderer's arsenal that Helgud is referencing.
Here is the Book of Fate, discovered in a secret room in the Arcane University. The writing in the book describes the destiny of its reader, so the words change from one person to the next. Some see only blank pages, and nobody knows why. Perhaps some of us are born with no destiny, or maybe the blank pages signify an imminent death.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what it says. Oh, now it's unclear if Calixto is pulling our leg here. If it's real, how did he acquire it? Does it suggest a connection to the Arcane University where the book was discovered? Or is it just a fake? After all, he seemed to know that when we opened it, it would just be blank.
Ah, now here's an item out of legend. This is Ishgramor's soup spoon. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is no spoon, it's a fork. Nobody can eat soup with a fork. Well, my friend, you did not know Ishgramor.
I think that answers the previous question.
Don't let this innocent-looking flute fool you, for this is the dancer's pipe. Legend holds that the dancer's pipe has won wars, toppled empires, and changed the very course of history. None know its origins, but the stories say that men who hear its music are compelled to dance uncontrollably, no matter the peril. To activate this strange power, one must only speak the magic words, which are... Oh my, I very nearly got us both into a nasty predicament, didn't I? And with that, the tour is over. I thank you for your patronage, and I hope to see you again soon.
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. His museum is pretty shocking. It's comprised of a book, a flute and a fork, along with some embalming tools and the memories of his deceased sister. But aside from the crime of evading gracious Trustpilot reviews, the only real thing of interest is that he's cropped up in this quest a couple of times, and now we also know him to possess embalming tools. However, there is something else that raised my eyebrows here. There is a chest in here marked Calixto's chest that requires a key to open. And that key cannot be found anywhere at this point. It can be found nowhere in his house, and it's not on his person either. However, there is a meat pie, presumably in his pocket, while he sleeps. So what is Calixto hiding in that chest of his? And why doesn't the game want us to know about it yet? Next up on the Brains to Pick list, we have Viola Giordano, the author of these pamphlets, warning the people of Windhelm about the Butcher's existence. She can quite often be found mulling around the city, so shouldn't be too difficult to track down.
Be on the lookout. The Butcher could be around any corner.
What can you tell me about the Butcher?
I've been following him for months now. Well, not actually following. Trying to find him. The guards won't help. The people won't help. I'm the only one who thinks he can be caught.
Why can't the guards help?
They say they're too busy with a war. I say, what good is winning a war if we're still terrorized by one of our own?
And how can the rest of the people not care?
Oh, they care, all right. Just none of them thinks to do anything about it. They say I'm just snooping around bothering people. But I'm trying to save lives.
Well, I found this journal in the killer's lair.
What's it say?
It sounds like a necromancer's been experimenting.
Woundfirth. There have been rumors swirling about him for years. As long as I can remember. But he's a dangerous man. That's why they call him the Unliving. I wouldn't approach him directly. This information needs to go straight to the steward. He'll listen to you.
So it seems evidence is pointing towards Woundfirth the Unliving, the court mage of Windhelm, who can be found in the upstairs of the Palace of the Kings. He has possession of some interesting things in his room, a bloodied human skull for instance. However, that doesn't appear to be too taboo for a mage. Now he can choose to accuse Woundfirth directly, which will progress the quest a tad quicker. However, judging by the length of this video, you can probably tell I have zero interest in actually doing that. However, I find his dialogue to be interesting, if not a tad unhelpful to his case. He'll open by saying whatever we've heard about him is probably true, and when we ask him what he studies, with regards to magic anyhow, he says this.
Whatever I don't already know. Power's the crux of this world. There's always more of it to be had, if you look in the right places.
And this certainly lines up with what's said in the Butcher's journal. The Butcher expresses dissatisfaction with the mages of the College of Winterhold only exploring the magic they know. Woundfirth is clearly hungry for more knowledge. Whether that hunger for knowledge extends to dark necromantic rituals is unclear. However, if we choose to accuse the man, he'll deny it.
I beg your pardon? Necromancy. I am a member of the College of Winterhold. In good standing. They haven't allowed necromancy for hundreds of years.
In case it turns out Woundfirth is the Butcher, I have slapped a bucket on his head as a preemptive punishment of sorts. However, as he states, he's a member of the College of Winterhold, in good standing, and is insulted at the very thought of being perceived to practice necromancy. However, this confirms he is a current member of the College of Winterhold, and we know the Butcher was associated with the mages at the college at some point, though Woundfirth doesn't appear to hold the same contempt towards them. And he also has a meat pie in his pocket. Now something isn't adding up here. All the evidence points towards Woundfirth the Unliving. However, in fairness to the guy, from the limited dialogue we can have with him, we can gather he's fairly self-assured, almost to the point of arrogance. If he had any form of ill feeling towards members of the College of Winterhold, he'd probably express it. Also, this is our first interaction with him with regards to this quest. So from a storytelling perspective, it would kind of ruin the point of a murder mystery if it was him. Nevertheless, for the sake of the long-winded way being the most detailed, we can bring our findings to your life.
I don't want to believe it. Wulfirth has been a trusted friend to Ulfric for many years. It pains me to see that the Whispers had truth to them. Wulfirth shall be apprehended. I thank you for your diligence in getting to the bottom of this matter. The streets of Windhelm are now safe.
This will seemingly complete the quest, leaving us to observe his arrest.
What is the meaning of this?
You're under arrest for the murder of Susanna of Candlehearth Hall, and Frigga Shattershield, and all the rest. We are wise to your scheming, you coward.
Has the whole city lost their brains? I've been scrying and auguring to find the murderer myself.
You've mastered the smithing trade.
Make your excuses from the Bloodworks,
right?
Wizard.
Maybe
Get him out of my sight.
As well?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Now please ignore the Better Lydia dialogue mod obstructing that exchange a bit. It's a good mod and I highly recommend it if you want a follower with some personality early in the game. But now Wulfirth will be imprisoned, where he will still train us in destruction magic apparently. But now we can leave Windhelm, giving ourselves a pat on the back, knowing that this city is safer than when we arrived. Returning at a later date to loving greetings of our heroism and... Oh fuck. It would seem Wulfirth isn't the Butcher. As though he's rotting in a cell, the Butcher is struck again. Just less than ideal.
What a waste.
Once again, we can ask a nearby guard what happened here.
Just holding up.
Indeed. I thought you captured the Butcher. You said the city was safe now. How could this have happened?
The killer must still be out there.
Obviously. You should visit the Bloodworks to talk to Wulfirth. We need to figure out where the evidence went wrong.
And with that, the most broken quest in Skyrim begins again, prompting us to head to the Bloodworks and have a chat with Wulfirth the Unliving, and possibly innocent. Sapping in Wulfirth, lad, seems the killer's struck again, mate.
Oh, isn't that a shame? And here I am in the Bloodworks. Looks like you aren't such a sharp investigator after all. What made you think I was to blame in the first place? I've actually been after the killer myself.
I found your journal and amulet where the Butcher worked.
My what now? I've never kept a journal, I can assure you. What exactly did this amulet look like?
8-sided jade ringed with ebony, a worn carving.
I know it well. Or at least I've heard of it. I would wager that carving once depicted a skull. That is the necromancer's amulet of legend. It appears you were at least half right. There is necromancy at the heart of this.
I guess Calixto was wrong.
Yeah. Calixto and his books are often confused about such matters. It happens to the best of us.
So what can we do now?
I've been noting a pattern to when the killings happen. Now that we know they're tied into some sort of necromantic ritual, I think I know when the next might occur. Let's see. From a Lordess of Last Seed until a Midas of Hearthfire, it will happen soon. Very soon. Keep watch in the Stone Quarter tomorrow night. That's almost certainly where the killer will strike next.
And with that information, we have one clear objective: to stop the Butcher once and for all. All we have to do is wait for night to fall on the Stone Quarter. For those unfamiliar, it's where the stalls are. Please ignore the building that's graciously despawned. We have a job to do, to stop the Butcher, who reveals himself as Calixto Corrie.
Better this one than me.
What happened?
Stopping him in a nick of time before he can claim yet another life. There's no denying this time we've got the right man, because effectively we've caught him red-handed, and then we sent him to sleep, permanently. On Calixto's remains we can finally loot the key to his chest, that also happens to be the key to his house, and take the meat pie, that's ours, allowing us to once again venture to Calixto's House of Curiosities where we can finally find out what's inside that chest. As it turns out, embalming tools. And the butcher's journal. Here's what it has to say. Soon enough, my sweet Lucilla, you will be with me again. Normally, when such words are written, it is because the love left behind is soon to depart. But in my case, I hope to soon bring your spirit back into my world, for it was you who loved this world so much, not I. I continue to collect your new form from the ragged bits around Windhelm. If they only knew what destiny would soon grace their bodies, with your spirit imbuing them with higher purpose, they would surely thank me for the great gift I give them. I reserve for them a place of beauty alongside your heart. The day draws near, soon I will hold you, and I will show you this, and it will be as delivering a long-forgotten letter to a weary traveller. Love always, Calixto. So it seems this nutcase was killing to resurrect his departed sister. It's the man's grief that turned him to necromancy, and this ritual was one he couldn't complete without taking lives. But none of that matters now. The real butcher has been caught, and Wunferth's name has been cleared.
I'm glad you were able to correct your mistake. I'll release Wunferth immediately. You've done the city a mighty service, friend. I believe you'll find the guards to be a bit more cordial with you in the future.
And I'm fairly certain this quest won't start a third time. And that's sort of it, a buggy experience for certain. Not to mention quite messy besides. But Skyrim, or any Bethesda Game Studios title for that matter, don't really tend to go for surgical precision, ever. But interesting nonetheless, and full of extra details, which is what I like from games, and though this mystery has a set conclusion in quest form that requires you to become familiar with the what, the who, the where, the when and the how, it's up to you whether or not you seek out the why. It's worth noting that you can cut out Wunferth's arrest altogether and complete the quest in a more concise experience, but I personally prefer the idea of proving his innocence by putting him in a position where a murder occurs when it absolutely couldn't be him. Now there are some theories that make all the evidence pointing towards Wunferth a bit more interesting, claiming that perhaps he and Calixto are in on the butcher killings together. And I can see why that would crop up as a theory, though I don't necessarily agree with it. At the site of the first murder, considering the state of the body, you'd expect the killer to be covered in blood. Calixto isn't, and we're led to believe that this murder had just occurred. Furthermore, if he'd just killed this woman, he'd have the body parts he'd extracted, and probably wouldn't have had the time to run to Hjerim and back, considering Silda the Unseen claimed to have heard screams and came running. So the blood trail being made by Calixto seems a tad far-fetched. Secondly, there's nothing to suggest that Calixto is too magically blessed. That may indeed be part of his deception. But you'd think such a necromantic ritual would need to be performed by a highly skilled mage with a lifetime of experience. And there are rumours that Wunferth the Unliving dabbles in such necromancy, and they must have come from somewhere. Though, at the heart of Stormcloak territory, unfounded wariness of mages kind of makes sense considering their beliefs in more traditional Nordic values that anything more than sticking an axe in somebody's head is overdoing it. We can even ask Wunferth if Ulfric has much need for magic.
No, but then I don't have much need for Ulfric.
People can be suspicious of what they don't value. Next up, Wunferth claims he's been scrying in hopes he can aid catch the butcher. And yet it's only when he's accused that he communicates this with anyone. Also, why didn't that scrying lead him to us before the case led us to him? Why isn't he undertaking active involvement in the investigation process? Scrying is all well and good, but if you're moping around in your study, not talking to anyone, what does it accomplish? While we're at it, following investigating Hjerim, upon presenting the amulet to Calixto, he doesn't seem remotely bothered that we have it. He takes the opportunity to shift the blame to Wunferth, so perhaps he knows there's enough evidence to suggest that Wunferth is the butcher, or at least involved in the butcher killings, because he knows that amulet is. And if it's being presented to him for appraisal, then somebody's getting close to the truth. That said, for this theory to work, Calixto would need Wunferth ideally not incarcerated. Just like he needs the amulet for the ritual, so he attempts to buy it off us. Oh, by the way, sell it to him when he asks, because otherwise it'll be stuck as a quest item in your inventory until the heat death of the universe. And as one last curious point, when Wunferth becomes involved in helping you track down the real butcher, He reasons that an attack will occur in the Stone Quarter the night after you visit him, with logic he could only have pulled out of his rectum. So you could certainly argue there are too many loose ends in this Blood on the Ice quest for them to all be red herrings. However, I don't believe this was intentional by the writers. I just don't think this quest was written to the best quality, and if that isn't the case, the writing didn't necessarily translate to the game particularly brilliantly at least. I also can't think of a logical reason why Wundfirth would conduct unethical necromancy experiments where the risk of being discovered is so high when Calixto's the only one who would have a motive for engaging with such desperate black magic. That said, I don't blame anyone for attempting to fill the gaps with theories. As for whether or not Calixto had a chance at succeeding in his objective based on my current Elder Scrolls lore knowledge I wish to expand, I couldn't say. It doesn't sound particularly easy even for a master mage of some description. So perhaps Calixto's objective was supposed to be as close to impossible as possible, as it helps highlight that he is indeed mental. But I'm sure those more versed in the lore of this universe will enlighten me in the comments, and honestly, I welcome it. But for now I wish to conclude this video, otherwise we'll be here for simply far too long. Hopefully I can use this video to springboard myself into more content on this game, or indeed this franchise, in the coming weeks, months and even years. And hopefully there are some more open-ended mysteries for me to explore down the line that require a somewhat more comprehensive understanding of this universe's lore. Nevertheless, I wish to thank you all for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends, all that wonderful stuff. It would be massively appreciated, but that you don't have to. It's only if you want to. And with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. But until next time, please take care, and goodbye.